Just know, just stay put.
Yeah,
Not going anywhere.
that's okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Bienvenue et merci pour les joindre. Today is our very last day of deep looking, or vision profonde, with myself, Melissa Laporte, and I'm joined today in the gallery with Julie Van Dyne. So if you had a chance to tune in to the last two episodes we did, you'll be familiar with the format, but I'm happy to walk you through it again. So the idea of deep looking is to slow down and to take some time to look very carefully at a painting and to look in a way that you wouldn't normally. So to challenge the way that you usually look at something without even thinking about exactly what it is you're doing. As I've mentioned before, these exercises are often prescribed to future doctors and nurses to encourage them to train themselves to identify conditions and complaints that perhaps even the patient hasn't noticed. And it gives more accurate diagnoses. It helps them be more in tune with their patients. And it also helps them slow down in what is undoubtedly a very busy and hectic day in workplace. So before we begin, I wanted to say un gros merci to our sponsors, le Centre Culturel Artem. And this program was made available through Nouveaux Horizons pour les aînés. So that's New Horizons. It's a program that's targeted at seniors, although of course everyone is welcome. And our goal is to help with mental well-being and to combat a sense of isolation, especially in these days with COVID, when we're all encouraged to stay home, stay safe, but remain connected through online videos, safe in-person activities, much like Julie and myself here in the gallery. We're seated more than 6 feet apart, respecting all these COVID guidelines to help keep us safe, but hopefully maintaining a sense of community, a sense of our connection to each other, and of course, a connection to art. So thank you very much for joining us today. As I said, this is our last session for this year. The Timiskaming Art Gallery and the Open Studio Libre are greatly hoping to continue these programs in the new year. As all nonprofits, we're waiting on grant results, but it seems likely that we'll manage to continue to do so in 2021. So hopefully, as the strain of COVID becomes hopefully lifted, we'll continue to connect with each other in these ways and in many more ways. So today, it was fortuitous. I saw an article published by the National Gallery of Canada, which states a new study that shows the connection between physical wellness and the enjoyment, the consuming of art. So that's art in every form, in music, in art, in theater, all of these things that help us be creative or help us explore others' creativity. In particular, I thought it was interesting, older adults who participate in community events, such as occasionally going to a theater or an art gallery like our own, are 20% less likely to develop a physical disability, and they show a 25% reduction in chronic pain. It's quite a wonderful thing. Also, people who attend cultural programs at least once a month, and this would be in person or online as you're doing, are 48% less likely to develop depression. Now, like I said, in this sort of pandemic that we're currently in, I think that's especially important, to keep a focus on our mental health, to check in with ourselves, to make sure we're taking time to do things that make us happy and promote connection. So as we know, art is a wonderful vehicle for communicating, that's with others and receiving the messages of others as well, connecting and learning. So without further ado, let's start connecting with this painting. So as you know, we aren't here to talk about the art history of the piece. We're here to look closely and see what it is we can see. So if we begin in the bottom right-hand corner, we see a spray of golden something. One might imagine it's tall grass, perhaps, spraying up from the corner, from the bottom left, and reaching upward. And it covers over just a little bit of this blue-gray shadow that stretches across the foreground, across the grass on the right, and towards the little road. And that leads our eye over to this white picket fence on the left. And perhaps we begin at the bottom left-hand corner, and we move a little bit more towards the middle ground, where we see the sort of second half of the fence. And then our eye is pulled across the canvas, once again, by the blue-gray shadow that stretched further. And we see a little clump of bushes that incorporate both the color of the shadow and the green of the taller trees directly above on the right-hand side. From that point, we see a little red something. On closer inspection, I think it's a red windowsill. It's been painted against that white house, standing out against the green and the white of the stucco of the house. And that leads us to these telephone posts that are so orderly and neat. And they help lead the viewer's eye towards the back, the deep back of the painting, as these posts lead down to the beautiful sparkling lake. And we see the trees themselves, while mostly green, have been touched by the yellow and the gold. Perhaps this is the end of the summer, where some of the green leaves are giving up their color and turning yellow. The trees at the bottom, sort of where the road ends, are yellow with brown incorporated. Again, sort of signaling the end of the season. But the trees are still full. So this tells the viewer that while they may be changing colors, the beautiful weather isn't quite over yet. The trees haven't shed their leaves. And those trees lead us to the beautiful blue sparkling lake. We see this sort of the clouds reflected in the water, but also the play of sunlight on the blue water. On the far side of the water is this thin white shoreline, reminding us of bleached rocks and pale sand. We see the green line on the horizon, these thick bushes of trees across the lake. And if we recognize this scene as one that's local, we can recognize it as a scene from Hellebury with the hill that leads inevitably to the lake. And so I think anyone who's seen that view would also recognize the sometimes stark contrast between the trees that are near and the trees that are on the Quebec side of the lake, where the sunlight has caught them these bright highlights on the very dark, cool, colored trees. Leaving that horizon line, we look up and we see these gray clouds sort of rolling in, perhaps rolling away from us towards the east, with the blue sky peeking out behind. It's not storming here, but perhaps it's about to storm over there. And once again, as we We continue to travel up through the painting. We see these telephone posts or hydro posts and the lines that lead our eye up into the top right-hand corner. And if we think in reverse, these hydro lines almost act like a slide. You slide from the top right-hand corner of the painting down, down, down into that blue sparkling lake. It really gives you the idea of the steepness of the hill that we're on, which is very true to the terrain of Hellebury as we know it. That sort of everything leads to the lake. And I think if we allow our eye to wander in a spiral, beginning at the center of the painting with those white highlights on the blue lake, and coming out in a clockwise fashion, we see how the elements of the painting again lead the eye to the center towards the lake. You know, the trees and the clouds and the deep shadows, everything sort of spirals to make sure that you realize the focus, the center of this little world, which is on Lake Temiskaming. Now, if we pull our focus back again, and we try to think about just the shapes that make up this painting, the sort of individual shapes, without concerning ourselves what it is that they are, you see an interesting composition made up of these very organic lines. Nothing is really quite straight. Even the picket fence that, of course, you would imagine is very geometric in real life, very straight and orderly, has a much more organic, sort of natural feeling as it's been picked out with the paint, without the use of a ruler or some kind of straightening line. We see the roofs of the houses as well. And although they give the idea of straight roofs, the lines are not crisp. And it does sort of remind us of this brightness of sunlight, this sparkling feeling, where the sun is almost so bright, too bright to see things exactly. If we draw our attention back to the right-hand side, to these green trees in the middle ground, or rather the middle of the painting, not the middle ground, in the foreground, you see the green of the leaves with this luminescent white-yellow poking through, giving the indication of the bright sunlight behind the trees. The reason I picked this painting today is because it reminded me of the warmth, the sort of glow of summertime. Not that I don't love winter, but on a chilly day, sometimes it's nice to remember what it feels like to feel the sun on your skin, to see the water dancing and glittering, to see that road stretching out before you, hopefully on a walk to take a refreshing dip down at the lake. So I do encourage you to try to force yourself to take a circuitous route, a different route than you normally would when examining a painting. A scene such as this can be so familiar that you know what it is before you even really look to see what's there. It's a familiar view. But if you take the time to force your eye to take a different path through the painting, to really consider the white picket fence with that stucco building behind it, the sort of the little embankment that's on the right-hand side, with the white building behind it and the red windowsill. That sort of clump of brown trees at the bottom. And of course, the view across the lake. I'm sure you know that artists never paint a scene exactly as they come upon it. That's not the point of artistic license, of course. So while we think we may know the scene, it's important to give it your full attention, to explore it as if it's something that you've never seen before. Otherwise, you might miss an intentional deviation from the actual scene. So this includes our online portion today of Deep Looking. And I thank you very much for joining me. The conversation will continue in the gallery between Julie and myself, and I encourage you to continue the conversation on your own and to join us in the comment section if you'd like. I will post the link to that article that I was talking about as well, so you can read that yourself. It's quite something, and I think it's important to keep that in mind, that art is not just for pleasure, but that it is in fact part of a healthy lifestyle. To look at art, to listen to music, to view live performances, to hear the stories and the messages of other people around us and further afield, to remain connected in that way, and to exercise your faculties of investigation, of comprehending things in a visual manner or audio, but also to take that time to slow down and to look. So I thank you for joining us for this fall session of Nouveau Horizons, and I look forward to welcoming you back in the new year.